Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're concluding the 5th chapter of the Gospel of Mark. And this is the conclusion of these linked stories, these linked events in the ministry of Jesus, in which the word fear plays, the factor. It links them together. These are stories about fear, about frightening things happening. Jesus besting, gaining victory over all of our fears, and then because he's stronger, the fear now is translated to Jesus. We have the fear. We fear him, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's the beginning of knowledge, as the Proverbs tell us. I want to talk just a second about the nature of our fear of the Lord. And this is key to this story too. I mean, it's just there in the text, because in the text, Jesus is emphasizing that we are the children of God, that God sees us as children. We are always his children, no matter how old we are. He calls the lady that he healed of the hemorrhage, he calls her daughter, even though she was probably at least his contemporary in age, may have been older, or nearly his contemporary in age, because that was necessary. We're God's children. Now, if you can remember when you were little and you enjoyed your dad, I mean little, and you enjoyed your dad throwing you in the air, part of the thrill of that was the fear of it, and the fear of him, because he was that big. He was that much bigger than you, and he was that much stronger than you. And it was that little bit of fear, recognizing his bigness and his strongness, that gave you confidence that he could take care of you and provide for you. I mean, that's part and parcel of the father-child relationship, and you can see that. I mean, I see it every time. My son-in-law, he throws Zoe what seems to be miles in the air, and she won't let anybody do that. She won't let me do that. She just won't, because there's a level of trust that she has. There's also an ingredient of fear in that. If your dad's not big enough when you're little for you to be just a little bit afraid of how big he is, then you don't have the level of trust in his ability to care for you that you would otherwise. And this is not a cowering fear like he's going to hurt me, he doesn't love me. This is a fear that reinforces love and confidence in the caregiver, because they are that big, and they're so big it's kind of scary. I think I've taken too much time on that issue. So Jairus is facing the greatest of all fears, which is not that you're going to die, that you yourself are going to die, but that the child that you love, is going to die. And as much as your children love you and have confidence in you, you as a father know from the moment that they are born and you hold them for the first time that you are not strong enough, that there is so much beyond your control, and that if you don't have God backing you up, you're not gonna get through any of this. It's a great boon to faith to hold your own newborn, because you're left with nothing else. And that's where he is. So anyway, he's healing. He's had to stop on his way to Jairus' house to heal this woman. And while he was still speaking, verse 35, they came from the house of the synagogue official saying, "Your daughter's died. Why trouble the teacher anymore?" That's so cold. And you know that they're irritated that he's gone to Jesus to begin with. But Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, "Don't be afraid anymore. Just believe." And that's the message of all of these lessons, of all these events. This is the lesson of them all together. This one large mega lesson. It says, don't be afraid anymore. Just believe. And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And they came to the house of the synagogue official, and he beheld the commotion and people loudly weeping. These would have been paid mourners, not people who were that invested necessarily in the life of this little girl, which you find out. Entering in, he said, "Why make a commotion and weep? The child has not died, but is asleep." And they laughed at him. They were laughing at him. The laughing went on. But he put them all out, and he took along the child's father and mother and his own companions, and he entered the room where the child was, and taking the child by the hand, he said to her, and we have the words in Aramaic, the very words that came out of his mouth, so that we can keep them in our hearts and know what it sounded like when Jesus said them. Jesus said, Talitha kum, which translated means, little girl, get up. And immediately the girl got up and began to walk because she was 12 years old. He has to explain that because we might think she's so little she hasn't even learned to walk yet. But then, as Mark does, as a storyteller, he gives us this surprising and this most crucial detail. She's 12. And immediately they were astounded, and he gave strict orders to tell no one but that this, and he said that something should be given her to eat, and then she eats. This is just the best of all stories. I mean, this is such a wonderful story, and connects with me on so many levels. Until they graduated high school, I was the one who would wake my daughters up in the morning to go to school, and I would kiss them on their cheek or their forehead to say, get up. Time to get up. I miss that. And this is what Jesus did. He knows she's dead. This is a resurrection story. But he also knows that death isn't permanent. Not when you believe. And he just goes in. He puts them all out. You don't deserve to be here for this. And he takes Mom and the Dad and Peter, James, and John. And we've talked before about why Peter, James, and John. And I'm not exactly sure why Peter, James, and John. But he takes those three in. And he just takes her by the hand. And he says, it's time to get up. And she gets up. And then we find out that she's 12. A 12-year-old is not a baby girl, although their dad may call them baby girl until they are 50, you know. But they are a baby girl to their dad. And they're a baby girl, she's a baby girl to Jesus too. And he says to us that I love you the way your parents loved you, and even more because I can take care of you in a way your parents can't promise to take care of you. And that's the love that I have for you. And it's also the love that I have for your kids. As much as you love your kids, that's the way I love them, and I love them more. And we can never forget that, because ultimately we're powerless to keep the promises we love to make to our children. But Jesus isn't. And Jesus sees them the way we see them too. Okay, we'll pick up with chapter 6 next time. I'll get myself together between now and then, and thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.